The following program is made possible by Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
5 Democrats are running to replace Jerry Hill, and Josh Becker is one of them. He's here. The game is politics. The game is on. Hi, welcome to the game. I'm Mark Simon. My partner Kevin Mullen is on assignment. The 13th Senate District has been represented by Democrat Jerry Hill for 8 years. He runs from Brisbane to Sunnyvale, but he's termed out. He can't run again. So 5 Democrats are running to replace him in the March 2020 primary. One of them is here, Josh Becker. Welcome. I'm not quite sure how to describe you. In fact, I got into an argument with your campaign manager. So you tell me, what's your sort of 2 or 3 word description of yourself?
Yeah, well, some people said public policy innovator. My background's really bringing people together to solve big public problems, and I think that's what's needed right now. We've got massive problems I'm sure we'll get into today around housing, around traffic congestion, around sea level rise. And that's really my background, is bringing coalitions to solve those problems. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'd like to talk about today. Well,
before we talk about that, let's talk a little bit about what you don't have, which is any experience in elective office. And your opponents would clearly point to that as one of the things that separates them from you, because all of the other ones have some experience in elective office. How do you compensate for that, or do you think that's an advantage in this race?
Well, thanks. I'm really glad you asked that. Yeah, it's funny. I was the other day with Congresswomen Anna Eshoo and Zoe Lofgren, and Zoe was talking about the 7 House seats that we flipped here in California. Those were the critical seats to flip the House. And she was saying that none of the 7 had had elected office previously. But she was talking about the richness that each one brought through their experience as a law professor, as a business person. In fact, one of them has become a subcommittee chair as a freshman, which is almost unheard of in Congress. So I've served my community in a different way than some others. It's really been identifying talented people, bringing them together to solve public problems like we talked about. And again, those problems are big, complex issues. I talked about housing, transportation, sea level rise, and we're a wealthy district here. And I asked myself, in this wealthy district, how is it that only 50% of our kids are at grade level by 3rd grade, which that's the key level achievement, and that's only 30% of low-income kids. So what my background is, I've seen something that needs to be fixed in the community, and I work on it. So when I saw the need for more child care and early learning opportunities for working mothers, I joined the leadership team of Equal Start, and I got myself appointed to the Child Care Partnerships Council here in San Mateo County, and got involved with the big lift to create more early learning and more child care opportunities. When I saw climate change accelerating, I started Clean Tech and Green Business Leaders for Obama, and we rallied the green energy leaders in California and nationwide for climate change. Yeah. And so anyway, issues like that, and that's really, I think, the experience that I bring is really bringing those coalitions together. Let me just note, I do have experience as a congressional aide. I was a press secretary on Capitol Hill. For 6 years, I've been on a state commission. For 15 years, I've been a trustee in the UC system and a founding trustee of UC Merced. I've been on a county commission here. I've chaired my school bond, and I've been on my education foundation board for many years. So I do have some of that experience too, but it's really that experience of bringing coalitions together that I want to talk about.
Of course, the implication is that you don't understand the legislative process as well as someone who has been a legislator, whether it was at a city council level or even, I suppose, in the state assembly. It sounds like what you're saying is that the skills you have bringing people together translate very well to building coalitions within the state legislature.
I think so. And again, I've also, we have some other folks with great city council experience, which is valuable. But yeah, I have worked in Congress. It's very different to be one of 120 than one of say 5 or 7.
Well, but you weren't one of them. You were an aide to somebody.
Sure. No, absolutely. But just understanding that process and kind of how that works. And I'm just saying, but being one of 120 is very different than being one of 3 or 4 or 5. So, but I've been in a big legislative body like Congress and just sort of seen a bit of what it takes to bring those coalitions together. In my work on the California Workforce Development Board, same thing, right? We've got a window into the legislative process because we're pushing for various things that we need to get done at the state level.
Yeah, and I'd apologize in advance for dwelling on this, but why not start somewhere else? I mean, why start? You've run for the legislature before, unsuccessfully, but you acquitted yourself well, which is why I think people are interested in seeing you run now. Yeah. But why not start at a city council level or even the Board of Supervisors? Why jump straight to the legislature?
Yeah, well, I'm in Menlo Park, so city council has never been an option for me. The issues that I really care about, I think I can be most addressed and most effective and helpful to the community now at a state level, where, take an issue like climate change, right? I think I have the understanding, the networks, and the commitment to be the leader in our state on progressive climate policy because of everything that I've done. So I do work locally in climate, for example. So I'm on the board of Menlo Spark. Menlo Spark is, in many ways, leading the Bay Area, and in some ways we're leading the country. We just passed a green buildings standard that is among the strongest in the country. So I've worked very well at the local level. My schools, I chaired my school board, chaired my school bond committee. I've been on Education Foundation for many years. But I have a 2-school school district. It's a K through 3 and a 4 through 8. I think those kids are going to be okay in Las Lomitas. I've wanted to work with kids throughout the state. And that's why I founded the Full Circle Fund, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But for 20 years, I've been doing that. Maybe people recognize a little bit more. And actually, someone gave us billboard space. You'll see us now on 101. But for 20 years, we've been bringing people together on education, affordable housing, and economic opportunity. Education and environment and health, and looking for those programs that are working in our community and we can take them to scale. So I think that's the experience that's needed right now.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about housing before we take a quick break, and we'll come back to the topic if we run out of time in this segment.
Sure.
But clearly there are 2 issues. One is simply the need to build more housing, in theory, to make it more affordable for everybody, but then also the larger issue of affordability, and we're driving away lower income people and even middle class people because they simply can't afford to live here. What's your sort of shorthand solution to those problems?
Yeah, well, it's a massive problem, as you talked about. I was with Los Altos Teachers Union folks yesterday and talking about teacher community and from Hollister, and I hear those kinds of stories all the time. First, we need to diagnose the problem. Unfortunately, we just built way too many commercial buildings and created way too many jobs in large tech companies without the housing to accompany it, right? So the first part of the solution, I think, is to stop the leak, right? We're in a boat that's leaking, and as you said, that leak has capacity to drown our middle class, drown our union workers, drown all these other families. So I say that if you're a tech company or you're a large company over 1,000 employees, for every job that you create, you need to fund a unit of housing nearby. So that's not going to solve the problem, but first we need to stop the leak. Second, you mentioned housing affordability. So we need to subsidize housing. And we've done some good work here with Measure K in San Mateo. Measure A with 2 of our Full Circle Fund members ended up being 2 of the major folks to get Measure A on the ballot in Santa Clara County, $1 billion for housing. We have the school bond, the housing bond that we just passed with Jim Bell, $1 billion. But we need to do more. The federal government has decreased its support for tax credits. That's where I worked with Assemblyman David Chu. He's a proposal to increase those tax credits. But we need to look at local sources as well.
Let me stop you there.
Sure.
We'll take a quick break. We're going to be right back with Josh Becker. Stick around.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, The Next Stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. My partner Kevin Mullen is on assignment up in the state legislature, which is where our guest today hopes to go someday soon. Josh Becker is a Democrat running in the 13th State Senate District to replace Jerry Hill. You mentioned the housing for a company with 1,000 employees or more. For every new job they add, they should add a unit of housing. The great vast majority of the job growth taking place in this area are for companies that are much, much smaller than that. So how does that really make a dent? You know, you go to any downtown on the peninsula now that has restaurants or nightclubs that are open in the evening, and they're shoulder to shoulder with 20-somethings who are all wearing tech badges. They're all, you know, it's a great thing. It's a sort of an injection of new young people into the area. But they're the ones who can afford to pay these rents.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who have been here a long time who are very unhappy, and I'm not sure they would see this as the solution to the problem we're talking about.
Well, to the point you're making, these high-paid workers are pricing out, and they're driving out, not intentionally, but unintentionally, nurses, teachers, firefighters, others in our community. And a lot of the growth, though, is from these large companies. I mean, I saw a report that not in the not too distant future that Facebook, the daytime population of Facebook will be more than the population of Menlo Park. And the population of Menlo Park is about 32,000. So a lot of it is from these large companies, analysis that we've done. So again, I think that's a start to it. We also need to build up the economy throughout the whole region, and I've been a leader in that. I mentioned 15 years on the board of UC Merced. I actually chair an executive committee on the board right now, which is both to encourage entrepreneurship outside of the UC, but encourage Silicon Valley companies to open up an office there, right? Open up a headquarters or just an office so we don't have people commuting every day. You know, 10,000 people from Modesto. I did an event with Congressman Josh Harder. He said every day there's 70,000 people that commute from his district in the Central Valley to our district. And that's choking our freeways. It's congestion. It's horrible for their families. It's horrible for our climate goals. So we do need to do more. And we've got some resources now with some of the funding sources that we need. You know, we also have the $5 billion a year now in transportation funding. And I think we can synergize that with the housing bond and some of the new things that I want to create more transit. More housing around transit.
Okay, I want to get into traffic and transit,
sure.
And transportation in a minute. But before we leave housing entirely, SB 50, the proposal by State Senator Scott Wiener, that would essentially mandate the local governments build high-density, high-rise housing adjacent to transportation. Now, I should disclose, I worked for the transportation agency here. There's plenty of data that shows that housing holds its value better when it's near transit, and in fact is worth more. Do you support SB 50?
I support housing near transit. SB 50, at this stage, I cannot support it. At this stage, it's been a one-size-fits-all solution. And you know, when I look across the Bay Area, you have communities like Cupertino who talk about building a wall and keeping others out. But you have communities that are doing a lot, communities like San Mateo, communities like Mountain View, that are building a lot of housing. And they're building it sometimes where it's needed. Sometimes it's not needed near transit. Sometimes it's needed out near the Bayview where Google is, right? And Google, one of the company that looks like it is stepping up now to do that and actually build a lot of housing. After a lot of encouragement, you know, to do so. I think there are ways, you know, I look what LA did in 2016. Voters there exercised local control, not to stop development. They exercised local control to increase development. They said, we will fast track development of transit-oriented affordable housing projects. And they put that on the ballot and they passed that. So it's not always local control that's a problem. Sometimes it's our imagination and public problem solving.
But the issue behind SB 50, and there's some validity to it, is that city councils battered by residents who don't want this sort of development will not build. Now, yeah, you can cite individual examples and anecdotal examples where some cities have done better. But how do you get cities to be more aggressive in building housing, or do you think that's not the role of the state legislature?
Well, I think we can provide carrots and sticks. I'm very proud to have the endorsement of Governor Newsom. the reason I've got Governor Newsom's endorsement is I've worked with him for 20 years on housing and homelessness, and actually clean energy. I was on his Clean Energy Advisory Council back when he was the mayor, but in San Francisco, but it was really around housing and homelessness. He's got a very bold agenda, to build millions of homes across the state. I'm going to work with him, and we're going to find a way to get it done. But it can be carrots and sticks. I was meeting with the folks from SV at Home the other day, and we were talking about this issue. You're building affordable housing, the impact fees that you have to pay, it's up to $100,000, in some cases $150,000 a door that you're looking to build. The state could say, hey, if you're building affordable housing, you developer, you don't pay that. We'll backfill that, right? So that's a nice carrot there to build affordable housing. Right now, commercial is more profitable for these communities. That's where the tax revenue is. So we need to even out some of those incentives, and maybe for cities again like Cupertino do nothing, then the state does have to come in. But I don't think we're quite there yet. Okay,
let's talk quickly about traffic. Well, we haven't got a ton of time before the next break, but we'll plunge ahead. If you're not talking about housing, you're talking about traffic.
Yeah.
And it's making everybody crazy.
Yeah.
What's your answer to that problem? Yeah. Does it get better, or is this just the status quo?
I think we've not been, ambitious enough. We've done some great work with Measure W here and in Santa Clara County, but I think if you look what LA has done, $123 billion for public transportation, and if you haven't checked it out recently, it's working. They're doing it. Seattle, a similar city with similar issues, $80 billion. So there is a movement now to put something on the state ballot, and actually it needs some help from Sacramento to get there, that would create $100 billion for transportation here
that's
in the Bay Area.
That's the so-called mega measure that's
mega measure,
all the Bay Area counties.
Yeah. So things like Dumbarton Rail, that I'm a big advocate of, and working with Warren Slocum, who's also endorsed me, he's been a mentor on that issue. We have 42 at-grade crossings, as you know, and I'm very excited about Caltrain electrification, but as someone who crosses those tracks all the time and drop my daughter off at school, we need to just bite the bullet, and no pun intended, so we can have more bullet trains, and fix those crossings and get great separation. So I think that is part of the solution.
We're going to take another break.
Yeah.
We're talking to State Senate candidate Josh Becker. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. My partner, Kevin Mullen, is on assignment doing good works up in the state legislature, which is where our guest, Josh Becker, would like to go in 2020. He's running for the 13th State Senate District, which is currently held by Jerry Hill, who was termed out. We've barely scratched the surface of all the things that we need to talk about.
I know.
And I'm sorry about that, but there's a lot to talk about. Let's talk a little bit about income inequality, because it is one of those hidden issues.
Yeah.
How do you, are minimum wage increases, are those the way to get at that problem, or is there another way?
Well, that's one of the ways. There's a lot of things that we need to do. I was looking at what defines low income in San Mateo County. For a family of four, $117,000, very low income. And for an individual, I think that's $83,000.
Yeah, I think the average income is $178,000, something like that.
But what is their starting salary for teachers? Around $50,000. Yeah. Right? So we need to pay our teachers more. That's one of our big priorities that we need to do. Let
me stop you there, because all the things we're talking about require more revenue.
Yeah.
There's a lot of thought that we're heading into a recession. I was astonished that President Trump would openly use that word, because that's anathema to elected officials. But how does that happen? I mean, we have a lower threshold now for bond measures, so it's easier to get money to build a school than it is to occupy it with teachers.
Yeah.
So how do you get, you say we need to pay them better. How do you pay them better?
Yeah. And I know because I chaired one school board and I've been on the board for two others. You're right. That's a bit of an irony. Well, we need legislators who are going to take on the tough issues, who are not beholden to special interests, and I'm very proud, especially from a region like this, to go up there and take on the tough issues. So Senator Jerry Hill, as you mentioned, he's been a fantastic state senator, leading on many issues, unfortunately terming out, as you mentioned. We got to fill his shoes. Your partner, Kevin Mullen, I've talked to a lot about these structural issues. So yes, the problem is our top line tends to go like this because we're so dependent on income taxes. We need to find ways to both to level those out with new sources of income. Property tax, before Prop 13, it was 2/3 commercial, 1/3 residential. Now it's 2/3 residential, 1/3 commercial, right? So we need to level that out, have tax fairness. There's a Draeger's and Trader Joe's in Menlo Park. One pays 7 times the property tax of others. It just doesn't make sense, right? So there's things that we can do. We're the only oil-producing state in the country that doesn't have an oil extraction tax, for example. But we need to look at spending as well. Currently spend about $105 billion on Medi-Cal. The federal government pays about, I think about 75% of that. We've recently done the analysis, and 50% of that spending goes to 5% of the people. Now, some of those people have long-term conditions and they really need that help. Some of them are in and out of, have addiction, other issues, in and out of emergency rooms at $50K a pop. We've done some pilot programs. We can make them healthier and also save the state a lot of money. So we need to look at both the revenue side and the expense side.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about Silicon Valley as an entity.
Yeah.
You're well on your way to raising around $900,000 for this campaign. If the trend continues, you've raised over $600,000 so far. A huge percentage of that money has come from people in the tech industry. Now, I know that's to some large degree your background, so it would make sense you go ask people for money from the place you come from. But when you say you're not beholden to special interests, does that qualify? I mean, are you maybe not necessarily beholden, but part and parcel of the tech community and therefore going to represent their interests perhaps more than others?
Well, I'm raising money from lots of folks. That's what I'm really proud of. I mean, at the last reporting deadline, I had twice as many contributors as all the other candidates combined. And I think that's not a surprise. So I ran in 2010, as you mentioned, came very close to Assembly, raised a bunch of money back then. So I have a lot of people who were very interested. They knew I came close. They want to see me up there. So I'm very proud of the breadth of our fundraising as well. So listen, I've been many things. I'm teaching a small business seminar series at College of San Mateo, but I've been fortunate to be involved with the clean tech revolution and technology and now biotech. And some of those are supporting me as individuals. But I've never worked with one of those big tech companies, and I think I'm actually the candidate so far in the race who's really standing up and saying they need to pay their fair share. I mean, there's a reason. For example, San Francisco, San Jose, they have payroll taxes. I love the line in one of your columns where you said these peninsula communities used to be a hotbed of social rest. Now that's changing, right? We have some of the largest companies in the world. We don't have a payroll tax. Mountain View did the first head tax, $100 per employee, just for the large companies. That was $5 million for Google, like a drop in the bucket. So
you're saying you would support a payroll tax, just to make sure.
Yeah, head tax. Yeah, absolutely. We need to make sure they pay, because that funds infrastructure. I mean, in Mountain View, it's specifically dedicated just for transportation. So for transportation, for housing, these companies need to pay their fair share. And then we also need to check they're good actors in terms of data privacy and in diversifying their workforce. I've been a big leader in that. I've been a founding advisor to something called the Board List, which is playing a leading role getting women on boards in Silicon Valley. So there's a lot of work that those communities need to do, and I'm happy to take them to task to do it.
Okay, we've got just a couple of minutes left.
Yeah.
Let me give you a chance to sort of make the pitch. Why should people vote for you for the state Senate, and especially over the other 4 candidates?
Yeah. I think it's because of that background that we talked about. Both the background, again, at the state level, on a state commission, and locally on a county commission, and as a congressional aide, but really that background of solving big public problems, right? If we're going to tackle this issue of housing affordability, if we're going to tackle the difficult issues of transportation, again, I think it's going to take that $100 billion, that faster Bay Area investment that we need. If we're going to tackle sea level rise, I think I can be the progressive leader for climate change. If we're going to really fund our higher education system and eliminate the student debt, that's experience I have working in the community colleges and being a founding trustee of the only new UC in 40 years, that we've built. So I think I've got that range of experience that I can bring people together. We need the public sector, the nonprofit sector, the private sector to all work together to tackle these big issues. And I think I'm the person to help lead this district and be that voice representing our district, doing it for our district, with our district, and representing the district in Sacramento.
We've got 30 seconds left. It's criminal of me to ask you, do you support the eventual completion of the high-speed rail system?
Well, I think we need to get to San Jose. I'm a big supporter. As someone we've actually, on the UC Merced board, we've looked at actually running our own shuttle, valley to valley. So I think we need to complete that link, and that's what I'd focus on.
Josh Becker, candidate for the 13th State Senate District, thank you for being with us. Thank you for being with us. Join us next time on The Game.
Thank you.